So today I am here with a couple of great youth ministry friends of mine. I have Jeremy Wong, who is the youth pastor for the Centerville Seventh-day Adventist Church, and Edward Martone, who is the pastor for the Mansfield Seventh-day Adventist Church. All right, so we've discussed the differences between discipleship and mentoring. Focusing specifically on mentoring, because that's what you're doing your DMin in, what are some of the do's and don'ts of, mentoring? Are there things that you've experienced yourself with a mentor or a mentee, Jeremy as well? What are some of the things that you've experienced that you'd recommend others do or don't do, whether it was for you personally or you did it for somebody else?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is consider mentors in your own life. So, a few examples from my own life of mentorship. I grew up in the church, you could say. My parents were involved heavily as musicians in the church, so choir practices. So I've gone to church ever since I could ever know. And there were people in my life that were mentors from a young age. So when I was just 10, 11 years old, the pastor seemed to be a mentor in my life. He was one that would engage young people and children in the sermon. So he'd start off his sermon with, I want to talk to the young people a little bit and just ask them questions about a Bible story. And so try to engage us. And I saw that as a mentoring where you don't dismiss somebody. You actually engage them in a friendly conversation. When we moved from Cleveland down to Atlanta, I was about 13, 14, another pastor, he would come alongside and he loved to play tennis and I loved to play tennis. So his mentoring took on the role of, I'm going to play tennis with this young guy. So we'd play tennis every week, and I think that's a way of mentoring. So mentoring does not only entail spirituality, but eating with somebody, maybe having a hobby that you're both interested in, and getting to know somebody. And it is in those moments of friendship that I think mentoring can be best utilized.
Edward, you said something that I think personally is a key as far as mentoring. And you said getting to know someone. We're talking about youth ministry and mentoring in youth ministry. The more and more I do youth ministry, the more and more I'm convinced the foundation of youth ministry is relationship. It's relational ministry. And the ability, not only the ability, but the permission you need to talk truth into a young person's life is they need to have a relationship with you. As I look back in my life, all the mentors I had a relationship with them first. And because I had the relationship with them, and because I knew that they cared about me, first and foremost, I was more willing to listen to the counsel that they've given me. If some random guy walks up to me on the street and starts telling me things I should and shouldn't do, I'm gonna dismiss it because, what right do you have to speak to me? I don't even know you. So I think the key to mentoring, before you even start mentoring a young person, is to make sure that you have a relationship with them. And I think what Edward was saying is how you build a relationship with them. Hobbies, talking with them, going out to eat with them. Anytime there's food, a teenager is going to come running. Let's be honest. Anytime there's food, a teenager is going to come running. So building that relationship with them, I think, gives you the permission to speak truth into a young person's life.
That's right.
So mentoring doesn't have to be every single time that you sit down with your mentee or with your mentor, this checklist of, okay, so this is what we're going to talk about today specific to where your life goals are related to this topic. It can be, definitely that personal interest in how are you doing, how are you feeling, and getting to know the individual at that level and taking a personal interest. I know from the mentors that I've had in my life, both professionally and then spiritually, it's always been that. They've always cared about me as the individual, not so much as the career objective.
Yes.
Helping me actually make sense of what's going on around me, which is where I've seen the greatest impact when I'm mentoring students as well as having others mentor me is not necessarily saying this is what you should or shouldn't do, but helping with whatever happens be put into the proper context so that I can respond and grow and move forward from it.
And I think you've had it right. It's the relationship. It's that building, journeying together in life, and not necessarily having a goal of a checklist that you have to go through. So the do's of mentoring is just get to know somebody relationally, care for them, pray with them, pray for them, and have fun with them. Eat together, socialize together. It doesn't always have to be with a Bible in the hand and a tie on. And the other aspect of mentoring that we need to remember is when we think of mentors in our lives, it wasn't until later in life, after my dad passed away, I realized he was a mentor in my life. And sooner or later, mentees don't necessarily learn from what you say to them. They learn from what you actually do. So, for example, after my dad passed away, I realized I've learned from him how to have my devotions. And I would visit with my dad. I was already a pastor. He was doing construction work. I visited with him on a vacation of mine, and I did construction with him just to spend time with him. So we'd be out there 12 hours a day, sweating away, putting up bricks or whatever on the construction site. Well, he'd wake up 6 o'clock in the morning. He'd sing a hymn. He'd open his Sabbath school lesson. He'd open his Bible. And I'm exhausted. I'm trying to sleep. But then it dawned on me later, I begin my day singing a hymn. I read the Bible, and I'm like, my own dad mentored me in what he did. He never told me how to do my devotion. So mentoring then, the do's of mentoring is by living in a relationship with someone, they pick up those things they need to learn from what they see you doing, not so much from what you tell them.
I've actually had a similar thought on that, as it relates to youth ministry, because once you get into a youth ministry setting, a youth pastor setting, you may have 30, 40, 50 kids that, there's not enough hours in the day to mentor that many students, even if they all lined up and said, we want mentoring, which isn't going to happen either. But thinking about what you just said, as well as some of the other mentors that I had in my life, I wouldn't say that all of my mentors I sat down and had lunch with on a weekly basis, or played tennis with, or that sort of thing. So as mentors ourselves, as leaders, we're indirectly mentoring people just through the example that we're setting. And, Paul says that in the New Testament, don't be a stumbling block for somebody else. Right. And I've come back to that a lot of times when talking with students, whenever they bring up a topic like, should I watch R-rated movies, or what about music, or whatever it is. And I tell them, you don't want that to be a stumbling block for yourself or for somebody else that might struggle with it more than you. So living out that example of, I come to church every week, even though I might not feel like it all the time, and I'm always there for other people when they need me. Having that Bible in hand, and those other students that you might not be meeting with on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, you're indirectly mentoring at the same time.
I think that's very important too. The saying goes, I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. And I think that's exactly right. When we mentor young people, I think the impact of our words would be greater if they see what we've said. And even if we don't talk with them, I think when they see us, it definitely makes, like you said, an indirect impact. When you're in Taco Bell and the line is long and you're getting frustrated, kids are looking at you. What they see you do is going to make a greater impact than if you talked about patience in Sabbath school.
That's right.
It's going to make a greater impact in them seeing what you do in that situation than what you will ever say. So I think that is important too, as far as the do's of mentoring. Not only building that relationship, but also, acting what you say. Not being a hypocrite. We know that hypocrites are a huge turnoff to young people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just as important to not only build that, like I said, build that relationship and speak truth into the kids' lives, but also live that truth out in your own life.
Now, we've talked a lot about the do's of mentoring, but a lot of people always want to know what some of the don'ts are. And, just thinking through the whole process, one of the things that I can see as the most harmful thing to mentoring is being critical. It almost on the verge of judgmental, which students pick up on right away. Like you talked about hypocrites. As soon as somebody starts becoming judgmental, then they immediately start flipping on that hypocrite switch as well. So going through some of the mistakes that I've made with students, as well as learning from mentors that have mentored me, it's very harmful. I don't want to listen to what they have to guide me, no matter how beneficial it might be. If I feel that they're being critical and judgmental of me and not constructive in a way that, they're doing it from a place of caring and love out of that relationship. Are there other don'ts that you came up with as you were looking at things, or Jeremy, in your experience?
One thing that I've learned as far as a don't in mentoring is, sometimes as leaders, we want the kids to always look at us as the righteous person that doesn't make a mistake. And granted, we're human. We're going to make a mistake. So I think a don't of mentoring is not acknowledging when you make that mistake. Prime example in my own life. I was having a lock-in at church, and in youth ministry, that's already a headache. So I was already stressed, already tired. The kids were hungry, so I was like, okay, I'll take you guys to Taco Bell. So I took them to Taco Bell. I was standing there in line, and it was taking forever. And then one of the kids behind me was talking, and he was being annoying. And I said to him, one of the fruits of the gospel is to be patient. And then a young person right beside me said, "Yeah, like what you're not doing, right?" It was a slap to the face. And right then and there, I was like, "You're totally right.
Yeah.
I am so sorry. I'm so sorry for not acting what exactly what I was saying." And so I think a don't of mentoring is, we want to live that life and that example, but we're going to mess up. We're not perfect, and when we do mess up, to be authentic enough to tell the kids, "I'm sorry. I'm not perfect. I'm trying and I'm striving to be more like Jesus, but I fall just like you do. And I am secure enough in my relationship with Jesus and in who I am and authentic enough to say, I messed up. I messed up."
I think it's a very good point. One thing we need to realize as spiritual leaders, if we're going to mentor, is not to think we're better because we're a mentor. And the other aspect is you can't rush mentoring. Even Jesus took over 3 years with his disciples, and that was daily mentoring.
And they still bailed at the end.
And they still. So you can't meet a young person and say, okay, I took him out to Panera or Taco Bell.
Yeah.
Now I can unload.
Yeah.
Because we had I think mentoring takes a longer process of building a relationship. So one of the don'ts is don't rush it. And the wisdom of knowing when to speak and when not to speak. Because there are times when you can bring up things in their life, but you gotta wait for those times when they ask about it. So one way that I've done mentoring with young people, again, a hobby is golfing. There were some young men in the church where I pastored in Cleveland. We loved golfing. We've actually just, before they would go to college in the morning, we'd go do 9 holes together. And would you know, as we'd hit the ball, one of them would come up to me and ask questions about dating his girlfriend, and asking me questions. So it would have been different if I would have come to him and say, all right, these are the do's and don'ts of dating. Don't do this. It's totally different when we're walking on the golf course and now he's opening up and saying, what do you think the steps I should do in dating? So patience is important. And another don't of mentoring, I think, is don't discourage. If somebody has come to you and you're mentoring them and you may get frustrated about their decisions, discouraging them and leaving them discouraged, I don't think is the biblical way. Whenever you look at Christ, he always gave hope to people. And hopefulness is a way to mentor, encouraging, praying with them. So those are at least some of them. I'm sure we can all think of people in our lives that meant well in thinking they were mentoring. They had a burden in their heart and they wanted good, but they didn't build relationships. And they would just go and say, you need to cut that hair, young man, it's too long. Or you need to dress differently. Or, you need to listen to different music. And they were thinking they're mentoring, you see. And so meaning well is not a prerequisite. I would say at least those are the don'ts. Just think of people in your own life that meant well and may have hurt you, and that can pretty well clarify a